The racist's voice echoed through Gleason's gym as he screamed the most vicious slurs at Muhammad Ali. Security was seconds away from throwing him out, but then Ali did something that left 50 people in that Miami gym completely speechless. What happened next would redefine what it means to face hatred with grace and turn a moment of pure hate into something beautiful that changed lives forever. If this story inspires you to see how true champions handle their worst moments, hit that subscribe button and let's dive into one of the most powerful examples of grace under pressure in sports history. March 15th, 1974. Gleason's gym, Miami Beach. The most famous boxer in the world was deep in preparation for his upcoming fight against Joe Frazier, and the intensity in that gym was absolutely electric. Muhammad Ali was in peak physical condition, his hands moving like lightning as he worked the heavy bag with precision that made even seasoned fighters stop and stare in amazement. The gym was packed with elite athletes, trainers, and boxing enthusiasts who had come to witness greatness in action. The rhythmic sound of gloves hitting leather, the skip of jump ropes, and the encouraging shouts of trainers created a symphony of athletic dedication that was music to any boxing fan's ears. But then, during Ali's most intense training session, something happened that no one in that gym could have predicted. To understand the magnitude of what occurred that day, you need to understand the immense pressure Muhammad Ali was carrying in March 1974. This wasn't just another training session for another fight. Ali was preparing for what many considered the most important bout of his career, while simultaneously dealing with death threats, constant FBI surveillance, and a level of racial hatred that most people could never imagine surviving. The American media had been particularly brutal to Ali during this period. His refusal to fight in Vietnam and his conversion to Islam had made him a lightning rod for controversy. Headlines questioned not just his boxing ability, but his patriotism, his religion, and his very right to call himself an American. Ali's longtime trainer, Angelo Dundee, later revealed that Ali had been receiving dozens of hate letters every week, many containing graphic threats against his life and his family. The racism Ali faced wasn't just ignorant comments, Dundee recalled years later. These were people who genuinely wanted to hurt him, who saw his success as a direct threat to their worldview. That afternoon, Ali was working through combinations with the focus and intensity that had made him heavyweight champion. His movements were poetry in motion, each jab precise, each footwork pattern calculated, each defensive maneuver flowing seamlessly into offensive strikes. The other fighters in the gym had gradually stopped their own training to watch the master at work. That's when the trouble started. A white man in his 40s, clearly intoxicated and filled with hatred, had somehow managed to get past the gym's front desk. He stood in the middle of the training floor and began screaming at the top of his lungs, directing his venom specifically at Ali. At first, the other athletes and trainers tried to ignore him, assuming he was just another confused drunk who had wandered into the wrong place. But as his words became clearer and more distinct, it became horrifyingly obvious to everyone present that this wasn't confusion or misplaced enthusiasm. This was pure, calculated racial hatred. "You think you're so special because you can fight?" the man screamed, using the most vicious racial slurs imaginable. "You're still just an uppity slur who doesn't know his place in this country." The gym fell completely silent except for the echo of his venomous words. Every boxer stopped training, every trainer stopped moving. The rhythmic sounds of athletic preparation were replaced by the toxic poison of one man's hatred filling the air. But what happened next shocked everyone in that gym more than the racist's words had. Muhammad Ali stopped hitting the heavy bag mid-punch. He stood completely motionless as the man's slurs continued to echo through the facility. The contrast was striking. Ali's perfect athletic form frozen in place while ugliness spewed from across the room. Then slowly and deliberately, Ali began removing his training gloves. The gym's security guard was already moving toward the Heckler, ready to physically remove him and probably call the police. Several of the other fighters were positioning themselves to help if things got physical. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. But Ali did something that shocked everyone present, including his own training team. He raised his hand clearly and decisively, signaling for security to stop and step back. Then Ali walked directly toward the man who had been hurling the most vicious racial hatred at him. The silence in that gym became absolutely deafening. No one knew what was about to happen, and the uncertainty was palpable. Ali's sparring partners were ready to jump in if things got violent. The trainers were positioned to intervene if necessary. Some people were already reaching for phones to call for help, but Ali's approach was completely different from what anyone expected. He stopped about 3 feet away from the racist and spoke in a voice so calm and clear that it carried to every corner of the gym. "What's your name, sir?" The heckler, caught completely off guard by Ali's gentle tone when he had been expecting anger or violence, stumbled over his words. His face, which had been contorted with hatred just seconds before, now showed confusion and uncertainty. "What? What does it matter what my name is?" he slurred. "It matters to me," Ali replied with genuine sincerity that surprised everyone listening. "You came to my training session today, and I'd like to know who you are. I'd like to know your name." The man, clearly intoxicated and confused by Ali's compassionate approach, mumbled something inaudible. Ali tried again with infinite patience. "I can't hear you clearly. Could you tell me your name?" "Frank!" the man finally shouted back, his earlier aggression now mixed with uncertainty. "My name is Frank Morrison." What Ali said next left everyone in that gym completely speechless and would be remembered as one of the most profound moments in sports history. "Frank, thank you for coming to my training session today," Ali said with genuine warmth that seemed impossible given the circumstances. "I can see that you're upset about something, and I'm truly sorry that you're in pain right now." The crowd of athletes and trainers began to murmur in complete disbelief. Here was Muhammad Ali being publicly humiliated and verbally attacked with racial slurs by a drunk racist, and he was thanking the man and showing him compassion instead of anger or retaliation. But Ali wasn't finished. "Frank, I don't know what's happening in your life right now that's making you feel so angry and full of hate, but I want you to know something important. You matter. Your life has value. And if this moment right here between us can somehow help you feel less alone in whatever you're going through, then this entire training session was worth it." Frank Morrison stood frozen in place, his mouth hanging open as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. The hatred and anger that had been contorting his face began to dissolve slowly, replaced by something that looked like confusion, shame, and the beginning of recognition of his own pain. Ali continued with even more gentleness. "I've been where you are, Frank. I've felt angry at the world. I felt misunderstood and judged. I felt like everyone was against me and nothing I did was ever good enough. But you know what I learned through all of that pain? Hurt people, and heal people. So instead of me being hurt by your words today, I'm going to choose to see the pain behind them and try to help you heal." By this point, many people throughout the gym were openly crying. This wasn't what anyone had expected from a boxing training session. This was raw, authentic human emotion being displayed in one of the toughest environments in sports. Frank Morrison began to cry, his legs giving out as he slumped against a nearby wall, covering his face with his hands as the reality of his behavior hit him. The people around him who had been angry and wanting him removed just minutes before now looked at him with sympathy and understanding rather than judgment. What happened next was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed in a boxing gym before. Ali walked over to Frank and knelt down beside him. The contrast was striking. The heavyweight champion of the world, one of the most famous and physically powerful men on earth, kneeling beside a broken racist who had just attacked him with the most vicious language imaginable. "Frank," Ali said softly, "what's really wrong? What's causing you all this pain?" Through his tears, Frank began to tell his story. He had lost his job at the shipyard 3 months earlier. His wife had left him and taken their children. He had been drinking heavily and had come to the gym looking for someone to blame for his failures and disappointments. "I saw you on TV," Frank sobbed, "and I got so angry. You seemed to have everything I wanted: success, respect, people who looked up to you. And I guess I wanted to tear you down because I felt so torn down myself." Ali listened with genuine compassion and understanding, never once mentioning the cruel racial slurs Frank had screamed at him just minutes before. Instead, he focused entirely on the human being in front of him, who was clearly suffering. Frank, I understand that pain more than you might think, Ali said gently. Success doesn't protect you from hurt or disappointment or feeling lost. I've had moments where I felt like the whole world was against me too. Then Ali did something extraordinary that no one could have predicted. He took off his training gloves and placed them gently in Frank's trembling hands. These are for you, Ali said softly. When you're ready to stop drinking, when you're ready to fight for your family instead of fighting against the world, you come back here. I'll personally help you train. I'll help you get strong again, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually too. The entire gym was watching this interaction in stunned silence. The cameras that had been there to document Ali's training captured every moment of this incredible transformation from hatred to healing. Frank Morrison looked at the gloves in his hands and broke down completely. But this time he wasn't crying from anger or self-pity. He was crying from overwhelming gratitude, shame, and recognition of the grace he was being shown. Ali hugged Frank tightly, and the gym erupted in the most emotional applause any of them had ever heard. But they weren't just cheering for Ali's response. They were cheering for both men, for the power of forgiveness, for the possibility of redemption, and for the reminder that everyone deserves compassion, even in their worst moments. As they separated, Ali made an announcement that would be remembered forever. Ladies and gentlemen, today Frank taught us all something incredibly important. He showed us that sometimes the people who seem the angriest are actually the people who need love the most. Everyone is fighting a battle we know nothing about. The story of what happened between Muhammad Ali and Frank Morrison that day didn't end when the training session was over. In fact, it was just the beginning of a transformation that would prove the lasting power of choosing compassion over conflict. Frank Morrison, a shipyard worker from Miami who had been struggling with alcoholism since losing his job, woke up the next morning with more than just a hangover. He woke up with Muhammad Ali's training gloves and a memory that would change the entire trajectory of his life. I couldn't believe it had really happened at first, Frank later told local news in a 1975 interview. I thought maybe I had dreamed the whole thing, but there were the gloves, and people kept calling to tell me they had seen it on television. I felt so ashamed of how I had acted, but also so grateful for how Ali had responded to my pain. True to his word, Frank used the gloves as motivation to turn his life around. Within a week, he had enrolled in an alcohol treatment program. Within a month, he was attending AA meetings regularly. And within 3 months, he returned to Gleason's gym, sober and ready to train. Ali kept his promise. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the next 6 months, the heavyweight champion of the world personally trained Frank Morrison, not just in boxing techniques, but in discipline, self-respect, and the mental toughness required to overcome personal demons. Muhammad didn't just teach me how to throw a punch, Frank said years later. He taught me how to fight for something instead of fighting against everything. He showed me that real strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. The transformation was remarkable. Frank got his job back at the shipyard, reconciled with his estranged wife, and rebuilt his relationship with his children. More importantly, he became an advocate for racial reconciliation in his community, speaking at schools and churches about his experience with Ali. That day in the gym, I was the worst version of myself, Frank would tell audiences, and Muhammad Ali responded with the best version of himself. That contrast showed me what I wanted to become. The impact of that day extended far beyond Frank's personal transformation. The footage of Ali's response became a teaching tool in conflict resolution courses, leadership seminars, and even religious studies programs. Universities began incorporating the incident into their curricula as an example of practical application of nonviolent resistance and transformative justice. Dr. Robert Martinez from the University of Miami wrote, Muhammad Ali demonstrated in real time how radical empathy and unconditional positive regard can transform even the most hostile situation into a moment of healing and growth. The incident also inspired Ali to expand his work in community relations. He began visiting high schools in racially tense areas, not to talk about boxing, but to talk about the power of choosing understanding over anger when faced with hatred or prejudice. People think strength is about how hard you can hit, Ali would tell students, But real strength is about how you respond when someone tries to hurt you with their words or their hate. Frank Morrison taught me that sometimes the people who attack you are really asking for help. In 1975, when Ali fought Joe Frazier in the Thrilla in Manila, Frank Morrison was ringside as Ali's special guest. This time he came not as a drunk racist looking for someone to blame, but as a friend, a student, and living proof of the power of redemption. After Ali won that historic fight, he spotted Frank in the crowd and dedicated his victory to everyone who believes people can change for the better. Frank Morrison continued his journey of recovery and growth, eventually becoming a substance abuse counselor and racial reconciliation advocate. He kept Ali's training gloves in a frame in his office with a simple plaque that read, "Hurt people, healed people, heal people. Muhammad Ali." When Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease years later, Frank was among the first to organize support in the Miami community. He helped establish a fund to assist with Ali's medical expenses and organized regular visits from the people whose lives Ali had touched. "Muhammad gave me my life back that day in the gym," Frank said during a 1996 fundraiser. "The least I can do is be there for him now when he needs support." This incredible true story demonstrates that our greatest moments as human beings often come not from our victories and achievements, but from how we choose to handle our most difficult and challenging situations. Muhammad Ali could have easily had that racist removed and forgotten, but instead, he chose to see the wounded human being behind the hatred and change the life forever. In our world that seems increasingly full of division, anger, and conflict, we can all learn from Ali's example in that transformative moment at Gleason's gym. The next time someone attacks you with words born from their own pain, remember Muhammad Ali and Frank Morrison. Remember that sometimes the people who seem the angriest are actually the people who need compassion the most. True champions aren't just made in moments of victory. They're made in moments like these, when they choose healing over hurting, understanding over anger, and love over hate. Muhammad Ali didn't just float like a butterfly and sting like a bee in the boxing ring. That day in Miami, he showed the world how to transform hatred into healing with nothing more than the power of human compassion. The racist who came to tear down a champion ended up discovering what true championship really means. And Muhammad Ali proved once again why he wasn't just the greatest boxer of all time, but one of the greatest examples of human dignity and grace under pressure the world has ever seen.